But first of all, Rob, you've had a few days to kind of digest and cogitate what went on up at Sale, and can you put your finger on perhaps where you could improve?
I mean, there's lots of areas for us to improve, but talking about improvement, when probably the significant areas probably that we just weren't where we needed to be mentally. You can rip the game up into all kinds of pieces. Scrum wasn't good enough, line-out wasn't good enough, defence wasn't good enough, discipline wasn't good enough. But the fundamental thing is it probably comes down to one thing. I hate to simplify it, but I think you could wrap it up by saying it's kind of what occasionally happens to a team that goes on a relatively long winning run, is that sooner or later, as much as you try and fight against it, as much as you talk about not taking your foot off the gas, at some stage you draw breath. And in the Premiership and against good sides, and especially against good sides away from home, which was a situation up at Sale, like I say, you don't have to be that far off your game collectively for you to get hurt, because things like the scrum and the driving more, they're very much collective efforts. And obviously you get really hurt when maybe as a group you're 5% off, because obviously it compounds massively because everyone's relying on each other to do their job and doing it flat out. And I think that's what we saw a little bit. We were a bit off our game, and I think in hindsight, because of that, and to actually come away from that game with a losing bonus point is probably something that was a genuine bonus for us, because we weren't as good as we should have been, yet we've come away with something on a tough night. And ultimately, sometimes when you do look back at teams that have successful seasons, sometimes you realise it's those points that are almost the most vital. I think at this stage we've taken points from every game this season. That's very important. It's something we must continue to do, because, as I say, ultimately it's the big games in this season are going to be won and lost in a few months' time. What we're doing at the moment is fighting to be involved in the big games. And so, I said to the lads, let's see it for what it was, which wasn't good enough, but let's not try and find some massive reasons and some massive things we've got to change in our style of play or the way we do things, because they've been very successful so far. What we have to be able to do is do them flat out. In the Premiership, you play flat out or you lose. There's nothing in between. And I think it was a very valuable lesson to me. As I said, so for me, it's about us really focusing on our level of performance, which, when we do that, is ultimately the most successful thing for us. I think in some ways maybe our issue last week against Sale was maybe there was a bit too much focus on we want to win this game because we want to stay at the top of the league, and it's all very well. It sounds very positive, doesn't it? Talking about winning, talking about what it takes and to collect points, but ultimately the points come with what you commit as an individual to the team. And that's where we let ourselves down.
In the last two performances, has it got the psyche out of the boys almost, that they know they can beat Bath now, whereas before it was always that little thing in the back of their mind?
I mean, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? I mean, I think again, but it's probably more the performances we put in over those two games that are the more pleasing things. And I think there are areas of our game that are no doubt getting better. Despite the Sale game, our set piece has been better, our kicking game's been better, defensively we've been better. I think we're still the third best defensive team in the Premiership. There are still areas of our game, as I said, almost halfway through, that are noticeably improved. The stats say it, the results say it. So that's ultimately something you've got to go back to. You've got to go back to why were those working well, refocus on them, and just make sure you reinforce that this week against Bath. There's no magic answers. A lot of the time it's just about working hard and doing the right things, and not getting bored of doing the right things. Often if you're competitive in a game, it's because you're doing the right things. And surprising how often teams go off track when they're winning and going okay, doing some relatively basic things quite well. And that's going to be an important thing for us. Get back to our basics, get back to those kind of core values that have been very good for us, and just believe in them and stick to them.